He was 17. Smart, soft-spoken, loved by teachers. No record, no violence, no warning signs. By 7 a.m. one morning, he was just a son. By 7 p.m., he was in handcuffs for double murder. This is the chilling story of Marty Tankleff, a high school senior accused of murdering both his parents, and the confession he gave only because police lied. The Tankleffs lived in Belle Terre, a wealthy, quiet neighborhood in Long Island, New York. Marty's parents, Seymour and Arlene, were well off and well known. Seymour was a tough businessman who ran a chain of bagel shops. Arlene was warm, involved, and devoted to Marty. The family wasn't perfect, but there was no known abuse or violence. Marty had a stable upbringing and a solid future ahead. Then came September 7th, 1988, the first day of Marty's senior year. He woke up around 6:15 a.m. As he passed his parents' bedroom, he noticed something strange. The door was slightly open. He pushed it, and everything changed. His mother, Arlene, was lying face down on the floor. Her head was caved in. There was blood soaking the carpet. Her body was cold. He panicked, ran through the house. He found his father, Seymour, slumped in a chair in the den. Still alive, but barely breathing. His face was swollen, bloodied. Marty grabbed the phone and called 911. His voice was frantic. "Please, my parents. My mom's dead. My dad's been attacked." Paramedics arrived within minutes. Arlene was confirmed dead. Seymour was rushed to the hospital in a coma. Marty was sobbing, trembling. He gave police every detail he could. He even told them something important. His dad had been in a business dispute with a man named Jerry Stuerman, a business partner who owed Seymour a large amount of money and had threatened him recently. Marty begged them to look into it, but they didn't. Instead, they began to look at him. He thought they were on his side, but within minutes of sitting down, the trap had already begun. Marty Tankleff walked into the Suffolk County Police Department around 9 a.m., just hours after calling 911 about his parents, still in shock, still reeling, still hoping his father might survive. The detectives, James McCready and Norman Rhine, didn't read him his rights. They told him it wasn't necessary. They said he wasn't under arrest. He wasn't a suspect, just a son helping solve a crime. But from the moment he walked in, they believed he was the killer. Detective McCready was trained in the Reid Technique, a psychological method used to extract confessions. It's built on one dangerous assumption: the suspect is guilty. Everything said in that room revolves around proving it. They isolate, they lie, they apply pressure, and they don't stop until they hear what they want. To a trained officer, this was just a routine technique, but to Marty, a 17-year-old kid who trusted authority, it was psychological warfare. For over 6 hours, they questioned him. They offered theories. They created doubt. They painted scenarios and watched how he reacted. Were you stressed out from school? Was your dad putting pressure on you? Maybe it wasn't on purpose. Marty denied everything. He even told them about Jerry Stuerman, his dad's business partner who owed him money, argued with him days earlier, and had every reason to want Seymour gone. But they weren't interested in Stuerman. Their eyes were on Marty. Then came the turning point, the lie. Detective McCready leaned in and said, "Your father woke up, and he said you did it." It was false. Seymour never regained consciousness. He remained in a coma until he died, but Marty didn't know that. He froze. He trusted the police. He trusted adults. And he thought, if my dad said I did it, maybe I did. He began to unravel. He asked, "Is it possible I blacked out? Could I have snapped and not remembered?" This is exactly what the detectives wanted. They encouraged the doubt. They said things like, "It's okay, you didn't mean it. Just tell us the truth and this can all be over." This tactic is called minimization. Make the crime seem accidental or understandable so the suspect is more likely to confess. And it worked. By the 6th hour, emotionally crushed and mentally exhausted, Marty mumbled, "If my father said I did it, then I guess I did." To the detectives, that was enough. They wrote it down, had him sign it, called it a confession, even though Marty never described how the crime happened, even though he still expressed doubt, even though nothing matched the evidence. There was no lawyer, no parent, no break, just a scared teenager, manipulated until he gave up. And that's when they arrested him. Marty Tankleff was arrested that same night. No blood on his clothes, no murder weapon, no fingerprints, no motive. But they had his confession, a broken sentence whispered after 6 hours of psychological pressure. And to the police, that was all they needed. To the prosecution, it was gold. The news hit the community hard. "Teen kills parents," the headlines screamed. A tragedy turned into tabloid gold. But behind the scenes, something darker was unfolding. The investigation was shallow. Critical leads were ignored, and key evidence, potentially pointing to another suspect, was dismissed without explanation. Remember Jerry Stuerman? Marty mentioned him during his interrogation. He'd just fought with Seymour Tankleff over money. He owed the family over $500,000, and just days after the murders, he did something bizarre. He faked his own death. That's right, Stuerman wrote a suicide note, emptied his bank accounts, left his family behind, and disappeared. Police found him days later in California, living under a fake name, wearing a disguise, but somehow this wasn't suspicious enough. Investigators told the media that Stuerman was just scared, not involved. They never searched his property, they never charged him, and at Marty's trial, the jury never heard what he'd done. Marty's defense attorney, Robert Gottlieb, fought back hard. He argued that the confession was coerced, that it came only after detectives lied, claiming Marty's father had identified him. He said the statement didn't even make sense and didn't match any crime scene evidence. Gottlieb brought in experts on interrogation psychology. They testified that Marty showed signs of coerced internalization, where someone actually starts to believe they may be guilty because of stress, fatigue, and suggestion. The defense also revealed that detectives had stopped and restarted the tape during the confession and failed to record some key moments. But prosecutors dismissed it all. They told the jury Marty was cold, too calm, too cooperative. They painted him as manipulative, a teen genius who killed his parents in a rage over school pressure or discipline. They had no forensic proof, no physical evidence, nothing tying him to the crime except one confused sentence and a detective's notes. Still, they pressed forward with one message. Why would someone confess if they were innocent? That question haunted the jury. In June 1990, after a highly publicized trial, the verdict came down. Guilty on 2 counts of murder, a sentence of 50 years to life. Marty was just 19 years old. His world ended that day. His youth, his dreams, his future gone. He was led away in handcuffs, staring blankly at the floor. At just 19 years old, Marty Tankleff was sentenced to 50 years to life in prison. One moment he was a high school senior planning for college. The next, he was inmate number 91A1117, locked away in a maximum security facility for a crime he didn't commit. No graduation, no prom, no goodbye to his home. Only bars, concrete, and silence. Prison wasn't just a punishment, it was a second sentence, layered on top of the first. Isolation, violence, endless noise, endless fear. He spent most of his early years at Clinton Correctional Facility, one of New York's toughest prisons. Inmates called it Little Siberia. Temperatures dropped below freezing, fights were constant, and the guards didn't care who was guilty or innocent. To them, he was just another number. But Marty refused to disappear. He refused to accept the label of murderer. Even behind bars, he kept fighting. He read constantly, law books, trial transcripts, psychology journals. He wrote letters to journalists, lawyers, innocence projects, anyone who might listen. Year after year, he filed appeals. All were denied. The courts refused to hear new evidence. Judges said there were no procedural errors, and the original confession still considered valid. No matter how loud he screamed, the door stayed shut. Meanwhile, the people who could have changed everything remained silent. Detective McCready retired without consequence. Jerry Steuerman rebuilt his life far from the courtroom, and prosecutors refused to reopen the case. To them, it was closed. A solved double homicide. Why look back? But Marty never gave up, and slowly, very slowly, cracks began to form. In the late 1990s, his case caught the attention of a professor at Hofstra University School of Law. The professor assigned it to a group of law students for review. They were stunned by what they found. The missing evidence, the ignored suspect, the bizarre disappearance of Steuerman, the flawed confession, it didn't add up. Then in 2003, a private investigator uncovered something explosive. A witness, someone who claimed Steuerman's son, Todd, had admitted years ago that his father was involved in the killings and that they'd paid people to keep quiet. More witnesses came forward. They pointed to a possible hitman, said they'd heard people brag about the murder, even placed other suspects near the scene that night. Still, prosecutors refused to act. By 2005, nearly 2 decades had passed. Marty was 34. He'd spent his entire adult life behind bars. By 2005, Marty Tankleff had spent 17 years behind bars. But outside the prison walls, momentum was finally shifting. His case had caught the attention of legal scholars, journalists, private investigators, and something rare had begun to happen. The public was paying attention. People were starting to ask questions the justice system had avoided for years. Why was Jerry Steuerman never investigated? Why was the confession never scrutinized? Why was no forensic evidence ever found? The case that once seemed solid was starting to fall apart. At last, a judge agreed to a hearing. Not a new trial, not yet, but a chance to review the new evidence that had surfaced. For Marty, it was the first real opportunity to prove what he'd always claimed, that he was innocent, and that someone else had gotten away with murder. The hearing lasted for weeks. What came out stunned even seasoned observers. Witnesses were called, people who had never been allowed to testify during the original trial. One man claimed that 2 individuals confessed to him that they had killed the Tankleffs, allegedly hired by someone close to Jerry Steuerman. Another said he saw a suspicious car parked near the Tankleff home the morning of the murders. He'd reported it at the time and been ignored. Multiple witnesses described a murder-for-hire rumor circulating in the community, tied directly to business debts owed to Seymour Tankleff. Still, police had never followed up. And the most disturbing part? Much of this information had been available to detectives back in 1988. They had it. They just never used it. Investigators also admitted under oath that Jerry Steuerman's house was never searched. This, despite the fact that he fled the state, faked his own death, assumed a new identity, and later reappeared in California with a changed appearance. The lead detective simply said, "We didn't see it as relevant." That single decision now appeared to be a massive failure. The confession itself was also torn apart. Psychological experts testified that Marty's statement matched the profile of a coerced, internalized confession, a condition in which a person, under pressure, begins to doubt their own memory and accept guilt falsely. Marty's confession didn't match the crime scene. No blood, no weapon, no physical evidence. And yet, that one confused sentence had sent him to prison for life. The prosecution insisted none of the new testimony was credible. They said the witnesses were lying. They doubled down on the same question they'd asked in 1990. Why would anyone confess if they were innocent? But this time, the world wasn't buying it. In December 2007, the court vacated Marty's conviction after 6,338 days behind bars. Marty Tankleff walked out of prison on a cold December afternoon in 2007. But this wasn't a happy ending. His conviction had been overturned, yes, but he wasn't exonerated. Not yet. The charges hadn't been dropped. The state still had the option to retry him. After nearly 2 decades behind bars, Marty was technically still a suspect. And that meant he was free, but not cleared. He returned home to a very different world. Technology had changed. The internet had exploded. Friends had moved on. Family had grown older. Some gone entirely. His high school graduation never happened. His 21st birthday was spent in a cell. His parents' graves were stones he had never seen. And now, everywhere he went, he carried a question. Was he really innocent? Because even after his release, not everyone believed it. The media had branded him a killer. The justice system had insisted for years that the case was closed. And many people still held on to that original narrative. But Marty didn't hide. He spoke publicly. He granted interviews. He told the full story, not just of the crime, but of the system that failed him. And behind the scenes, his legal team kept pushing. They wanted all charges dropped. They wanted full exoneration, and they wanted accountability. In June 2008, 6 months after his release, the district attorney announced they would not retry the case. No new trial, no new charges. Marty was officially free. And finally, the state admitted they had no case. Still, no apology came. No admission of wrongdoing from the detectives or prosecutors who built the original conviction. There was no accountability, no charges for perjury, no punishment for hiding evidence. The people who led the flawed investigation retired with pensions. One even ran for public office. To Marty, this was the final insult. So he made a decision. If the system wouldn't hold itself accountable, he would. He sued the state for wrongful conviction. And after years of litigation in 2014, New York agreed to a $3.4 million settlement. But to Marty, money was never the point. Justice was. So he took that settlement and used it for something bigger. He went back to school. He enrolled in law classes. He studied criminal justice, the very system that failed him. And in 2020, Marty Tankleff became a licensed attorney. Think about that for a second. The system that took away his future now had to recognize him as one of its own. He didn't use the law for revenge. He used it to protect others. He began working with the Innocence Project. He advocated for interrogation reform. Even after Marty Tankleff's release and exoneration, the true story behind the murder of his parents remains a mystery. Who killed Seymour and Arlene Tankleff? The justice system failed to find answers for nearly 2 decades, but clues never stopped emerging. Jerry Stuerman, Seymour's business partner and the man Marty had pointed to from the start, remains the prime suspect. His actions were suspicious from the beginning. He owed Seymour a large sum of money. He had argued with him days before the murders. He faked his own death to escape investigation. He disappeared only to be found living under an alias in California. Yet despite all this, Stuerman was never formally charged. Some claim they heard Stuerman bragging about the killings. Others mentioned a possible hired accomplice, a hitman who was paid to do the deed. The pieces fit a darker puzzle, one of greed, betrayal, and cover-ups. Law enforcement's failure to properly investigate Stuerman is a glaring stain on the case. Ignoring key evidence and focusing solely on Marty led to a miscarriage of justice. It's a reminder of how tunnel vision can ruin lives and allow the real criminals to walk free. Marty's story has changed how the legal community views coerced confessions. It exposed the dangers of certain interrogation techniques. It sparked calls for reform in police questioning and evidence handling. His fight has inspired many to seek justice for the wrongfully convicted. Yet, despite the progress, the truth about the Tankleff murders still haunts the family and community. No one has been held accountable for the real crime. The case remains officially unsolved. Marty Tankleff's journey is not just about a wrongful conviction. It's about resilience. It's about truth. It's about demanding a justice system that protects the innocent and pursues the guilty. And it's a warning that sometimes the greatest mysteries lie not in what's solved, but in what's left unanswered. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe for more deep dives into true crime psychology and the mysteries that shape our justice system.